Well, depending on which class you're in, good morning or good evening. This is NeXT Intellect, an offering of MCA, and this is Module 1, Lesson 3, Types of AI with a focus on Gen AI or Generative AI. Understanding different types of AI with focus on generative tools. Our pathway overview. This lesson introduces you to the different categories of AI with a focus on Gen AI and large language models known as LLMs. You'll learn what makes narrow AI different from general AI, explore how Gen AI tools work, and understand why these technologies are transforming how people work today. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to identify different types of AI and explain how generative AI can create new content. Your targets for this lesson, that you'll be able to define narrow AI and identify real-world examples of narrow AI systems. Explain the difference between narrow and general AI. Define generative AI and describe what makes it different from other AI types. Understand what an LLM, a large language model, is and how it processes text. Recognize generative AI tools used in everyday work and productivity. Explain how generative AI creates new content from training data, and identify appropriate use cases for generative AI in your future career. The key vocabulary: narrow AI, general AI, generative AI, large language model, training data, algorithm, machine learning, prompt, output, and neural network. Make note cards if you need to. Definitely go back and reference the vocabulary terms for this lesson. So for the live build demonstration, think of a tool that you use every day, like your phone, social media on your phone or computer. Maybe it's a video game. Can you guess what specific task it's designed to be really good at? So maybe you note social media is good at using AI, being able to suggest people that you might want to be friends with based on your other friends, and also the ads that we see based on people that were around and things that it picks up in hearing. Maybe the game is good at adapting its difficulty that you're playing to keep you engaged and for it to not be too hard or not too easy. And then the phone, the previous lesson we mentioned, the auto suggestions for filling out your text and fixing grammatical errors and misspellings. Those are some options. Notice those are all specific tasks that you're thinking of one at a time things. So maybe in that one case, it's just looking to check for misspelling. 2, have you ever used ChatGPT, Gemini, or another chatbot? What did you ask it to do? So think of that. ChatGPT is definitely probably the most embraced one between schools using it and already having to come up with rules of how students can use it and helping them like writing their essays and how much can they use it for where it doesn't break any rules and become an example of plagiarism. Gemini is Google is another example of a chatbot, but these are simply AI tools that we could just talk to or chat with and ask it things in our own language and see what it can give us as a result, its output, or even create things. So if you could ask an AI to create something for you, such as an essay, an image, or some code, if you were a software developer, what would you ask it to make? So maybe you get it to create an image for you for a homemade card you're wanting to make for Mother's Day or Father's Day. And maybe you're wanting it to help you flesh out a song idea if you have a melody in your head, but you don't play an instrument. Maybe you're not the best writer and you need it to help you with a research essay. Maybe you're using it to help write the next mystery thriller. Or you want to be able to write code to do something such as creating your own website Maybe you have a video game idea that you need help, that AI can help flesh out. All of these things are possible now. Now, do you think there's a difference between an AI that recognizes faces in photos and an AI that writes essays? And what's the difference? Well, notice that they're both artificial intelligence. It's just one is going to have been trained on a lot of examples of what faces look like and different types of faces. And that specific AI, if it wasn't trained how to also write essays, isn't going to be able to do that task at all. And then the one that was trained on essays and how to write essays isn't going to be used in the context for facial recognition. Okay? So both AI being used in different ways and trained on different things, so it's based on the data in its training. So types of AI. Today we are exploring different categories of AI and diving deep into the one we'll focus on the most is generative AI, and I will probably be shortening it to Gen AI. We'll start with narrow AI to understand how most AI works today, and then move into generative AI and large language models, LLMs. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to identify different types of AI and explain how they're being used in real jobs and careers. So first, narrow AI. Okay? And what is that? It's an AI system built to do one job really well, and it cannot do anything else. So just thinking of that word narrow, your options, right? If you're taking a narrow path, there's not as much movement along that path versus a broad path that might have many different ways branching off of it to go. Or we think of when you take a narrow approach to something versus a broad approach, okay? Narrow's limiting what it's doing at that time when it comes to its task, or we're also going to see with doing a specific task. Note it says doing one job really well, and it's not doing something else. So the example here is a facial recognition AI system is trained to recognize faces in photos, maybe in video, but it's not writing essays. It's not playing chess. Most AI you interact with today, where we are at today, is narrow AI. Okay, so pretty much all the AI you could think of is encapsulated in calling it narrow, and we'll see that it's usually focused on being task specific, on doing one thing, one specific task really well. So ultimately, they could become experts at one thing. So it could be an expert at writing, it could be an expert at generating images, an expert at generating music. And note that narrow AI is also called weak AI or task-specific AI. Your phone's voice assistant, like Siri or Google Assistant, is narrow AI designed to understand voice commands. Netflix recommendation system, that's narrow AI, its specific tasks to predict what movies and TV shows you might want to watch. Spam filters and email are narrow AI trained to identify junk messages. Self-driving cars use narrow AI to recognize pedestrians, read traffic signs, and navigate roads. Medical diagnostic systems use narrow AI to detect diseases in x-rays or scans. So we have a wide range there of things that are all labeled as narrow AI. Also, weak AI and task-specific AI. We're going to look at general AI in a little bit and narrow versus general. So since narrow is also referred to as weak AI, we have strong AI. And what it's getting at is where we are now is not at the level of thinking of like future scenarios like Skynet and Terminator, where AI seems to be sentient and set out on destroying us. All those high sci-fi concepts that you might have or TV shows that you've watched that dealt with that, like iRobot, okay, those would be considered of the future would be general AI. That's a lot further than where we are right now, and maybe still in our minds is complete fantasy or sci-fi science fiction concepts that we're not at today, and we don't even know if we'll ever be able to have AI be at that level. So narrow AI is where we are today. General AI, what I prefaced, is a theoretical AI. We're not there yet. It would be if an AI system could actually understand. If it could learn, yes, we said machine learning learns, but this is saying if it could learn like a human. So those things we said that it couldn't, like experiences and actually have memories and moments that are tied to meaning, right? Like a first kiss, holding hands with somebody, hugging a friend or a loved one, and then perform into any intellectual task that humans could do. It would be able to generalize at the point where it saw how to cook an egg with very little examples given to it, and then be able to translate that knowledge like we can to cooking a lot of other things in a pot or pan. That doesn't exist yet, where it could take just a little visual data or a little bit of input like a human can to be able to realize, oh, okay, if I touch a stove that's hot at someone's house, the first time I ever did that, I learned to generalize even all the stoves that look different. If any of them are on, and especially if the eye looks red or you see smoke coming off, I know not to touch it, but I also could translate that to other things that look hot and things like grills. Okay, so that's the level of how we could generalize as a human. Now, general AI would be an AI that could write code, it could paint pictures, you want it to have a conversation with you want it to solve math problems and do thousands and thousands of other tasks without being specifically trained for each one. That's the difference. We have AI that can do these things, to write code, paint pictures, but this future AI, this general AI or this strong AI would be able to do all these things with very little training on these specific tasks and be able to be a guru at all of them and be very much at the human level of understanding and intelligence. So that is what scientists are working towards, okay, is general or strong AI. But we're still many years away from this. It might always be a carrot on the stick that we're chasing. But for what we're talking about in these lessons, we're going to be focusing on narrow AI because that is the era that we are in now. An image to help give you some visual context. Narrow AI versus general AI. We have designed for specific tasks, such as playing chess. Okay, notice it lacks consciousness. It's not self-aware. Maybe it's a face detection system. Maybe it's speech recognition like Siri or Alexa. Maybe it's that recommendation engine that you use with Netflix or YouTube or Amazon. Narrow AI is prevalent in many applications. That's what we use today. It has a narrow focus. That doesn't mean it's not good at that focus. It's narrow in that it's niche. It's really focused in, honed in on that to be task specific. And it's following fixed rules and constraints, meaning that the one trained to play chess as well as a grand chess master is not detecting faces to see if the door should be unlocked for this person or not. Now, general AI or strong AI would be to the point of it having human level comprehensive intelligence, being able to perform any cognitive task that a human can. It would have versatile knowledge across many domains. And then the big one, the kicker, is possessing self awareness and understanding. So, can it become conscious? Can it be self aware? It would have problem solving and creativity, adaptability, reasoning, generalization, diverse skills, and learning across contexts at the level of a human. And that is why this is currently theoretical and something of the future. Now, our focus of our AI, generative AI, so generative AI or Gen AI is a type of narrow AI. Okay, it's also a type of artificial intelligence. And its main bread and butter is being able to create new content. I want to look at the word generative here, and you might note that it shares a good bit of letters with the word generate. Okay, so if we stopped here at the I and swap that to E and cut off the IVE, generate, and then also think of a generator. Okay, so generative AI or generate things means to be able to create things. Here we have the word generates. And then generator, I want to use that as an example. You think of a generator that you might have seen if somebody's power goes out and they maybe have one for their house. It's usually a not too large of a machine, but it makes quite a bit of noise. And its task is to be able to provide electricity power when you don't have access to power at that moment. And it uses fuel, and that's its input. Okay, it takes in that fuel. It does things behind the curtain, behind the metal of the machine, and the output and what it creates is the electricity that you could use. Okay, so in this case, you connect it to there's input going in, there's inner workings and things we don't necessarily have to understand, and then there's output. Okay, so instead of just an AI that analyzes things or classifies information, this type of AI can actually generate or create things such as text, images, code, music, and videos. Generative AI learned from many patterns, okay, of massive amounts of data in its training to be able to create things that are new and didn't exist before. So when you ask ChatGPT to write a paragraph or you ask a Dolly to create an image, you're using generative AI. Generative AI is one of the most exciting and fast-growing types of AI today. And so one thought to tie into that analogy of connecting a generator with it. Okay, so the input that you were putting in was fuel, and the output that you were wanting was electricity. Well, the output's only as good as its input. So you were supposed to put fuel in it. You weren't supposed to put in water. You weren't supposed to put in Gatorade. You weren't supposed to put in lemonade. All those would mess up the machine. The inner workings wouldn't work correctly, and you wouldn't get the output. So our output when it comes to it creating things like new text, images, code is going to rely heavily on us putting in the right type of input, okay? And then we don't have to worry about learning exactly what all happens in behind the scenes, the same way as we don't have to know how a generator works to be able to use it. Okay, so this is going to be an overarching view of some of these concepts and some of these terms and different types of AI. So here's an image that was created with AI to be able to show that maybe the person was using Gemini and Nano Banana is its image generator to be able to create a scene of mountains, lighting and everything. And I left in, we have these bananas that were added because that's a funny thing is sometimes when you tell it to use Nano Banana, then it will put in bananas in the image. I could always then tell it to remove the bananas from it, but I thought it was funny to show that this is something novel, something new that never existed before that the AI created, okay, by piecing together data and saying that there's a high chance that this is what you want when it's an ultra detailed photograph of a surreal landscape, okay, a mountain view, that these things would be included. So what is a large language model? An LLM. It's a type of generative AI trained on billions of words. So books, novels, anthologies, websites, articles, okay, medical journals, and all of this knowledge then is in its data set, and it's so much data, that's why we're saying it's a large language model. Note there are small language models that aren't trained on as much language, okay? This is what ChatGPT and Gemini use, okay, to be able to pull on information of like when you're writing an essay on how to write an essay and to know all these topics on like historical topics that it has access to that information in its data in its training. So the LLM is able to learn patterns in human language And not just English language, that it's able to have been trained on many world languages, and that's why it's also great in being able to translate things for us. Okay. And then ultimately, it's predicting which word typically follows another word. Okay. So we could break it down like that where it doesn't sound as complex. It has a lot of data that it was trained on, but it's ultimately just trying to predict when it creates something, what is the next word that usually fits in this context. So when you type a prompt into an LLM like ChatGPT or Google's Gemini, the model's predicting the next word, then the next, and the next, until it creates what it believes is a complete response of what you were looking for. Now, LLMs can answer questions, they can write essays, explain concepts, and generate code. They're called large because of the millions or even billions of learned patterns. So there's a lot in this image, but it was just to show that there is a lot that goes on in the background of things of what we don't see of the inner workings. But we don't have to understand all that. Just notice you start typing in text such as the quick brown fox jumps over, and this is say it's going to predict what the next word is. Well, it starts making connections that we have an animal here, okay, and we have its color. Maybe a wolf is somewhat connected to a fox, and it's making all these connections. Then it jumps. What other type of actions might it do? Well, it's already got to that, okay, over is where we're at. So it starts putting these numbers and all this math tied into just making probability, making a determination on what's the chance of the next word being, say, the, or or to, or some. Okay? So here in the output, it ultimately makes the determination that there's a higher chance, a 65% chance that the next word is the. Okay? There still is a chance that it's that the letter A or two, okay? But in this case, the is predicted, and that would be the one that pops up in like the suggestion. And this is also what it's doing when it's creating like the next great American novel for you. Not actually thinking or fleshing out all the details. It's predicting word by word what follows next, that follows those patterns of based on what it knows of great American novels. So how Gen AI works, with a simple example. Imagine you train an AI on thousands of recipes. Now it learns that recipes usually start with ingredients, then instructions. It learns that desserts typically contain sugar and flour, while soups contain broth and vegetables. So when you give it a prompt like write a chocolate cake recipe, then the AI uses these patterns to predict what words come next, generating a new recipe it's never seen before. It's not copying an old recipe, it's using patterns to create something new. This is how Gen AI works, whether it's generating text, images, or code. So you could get it to create that image of a moist chocolate cake with candles in it for the age of whoever's birthday it is. The cake to be decorated in a certain way, or even generating a new chocolate recipe based on what it knows about baking and chocolate cakes and what usually goes well with being popular, but maybe you want to have a little twist added to it. So then that might lead it to generate a recipe that includes something like cayenne pepper or paprika or something. There might be a little heat hidden in there with the chocolate. Now, generative AI versus other narrow AI, we have things like image recognition, okay, analyzing images or photos, maybe to tell you, label what is in the image to make a determination if it's a cat or is it a dog or is it another animal. Generative AI would create a new image of a cat from a text description, so that difference of analyzing the photo and saying, is it a cat? Generative AI could create an image of a cat. A spam filter reads an email and decides if it's junk. Generative AI would write a new email from scratch. A translation tool converts Spanish to English. Generative AI could translate and then write original content in English. So the key difference here is that Gen AI creates new content while most other AI analyzes or classifies existing content. So narrow AI would be the image recognition example, the spam filter, the translation tool. Then we have the ones that are labeled generative AI or creating things. So a difference here, that image recognition is making the determination with the probability, high probability that this is a cat based on what it knows about cats and their outline and all the data that it's trained on. Now, generative AI could actually create an image of a cat in like a rock band. And that's the difference that we have here. And this is something completely novel and new that didn't exist before. So a few Gen AI tools that you could use today. ChatGPT is an LLM, a large language model that writes essays, answers questions, and helps with code. Gemini by Google does similar tasks with a focus on research and analysis. DALL-E, Midjourney, and Stable Diffusion generate images from text descriptions. GitHub Copilot generates code for programmers. Adobe Firefly generates images and graphic designs. And Claude is an LLM designed to be helpful and harmless in conversations. It's actually made where it's supposed to be more empathetic, even though we said AI can't have feelings, to be even more human-like. All of these tools are examples of Gen AI systems that are built on LLMs or similar technology. They're changing how people work in writing, design, programming, and many other fields. So why does Gen AI matter for your career? Well, Gen AI is quickly becoming a core tool in most industries. Learning how to use these tools effectively will make you more productive and valuable in the job market. Understanding what Gen AI can and cannot do helps you use it responsibly and avoid mistakes. Many new jobs are emerging around generative AI, including prompt engineering, AI training, and content creation. The goal of this course is to teach you how to work with these tools confidently and ethically so you are ready for the AI-powered workplace. For your guided build, you're going to open a web browser and go to chat.openai.com. If you haven't used ChatGPT before, I'll be able to type in chat, start typing it out, and go to my ChatGPT. And then if you hadn't already, you'll create an account, okay, or sign in if you already have one. It's a free tier that you don't have to pay for anything. What I'll be pulling up is actually a paid tier. And in the chat box, we're going to type in a prompt, okay? So we'll identify where to put the prompt at. We're going to type in, explain what a large language model is in one sentence, like I am 10 years old, and then press enter and read the response. Notice that the AI is going to generate a new sentence or new message specifically answering the prompt. So what is it? Explain what a large language model is in one sentence, like I'm 10 years old. Okay. Chat GPT. I actually am logged out at the moment, but just for sake of brevity, we'll go ahead and type it in here. Explain LLMs to me as if I were, and it was in one sentence, as if I were a 10-year-old. Notice I don't have to worry about ending punctuation or if I'm capitalizing the first letter to get my message across, especially with something as simple as just giving it a prompt of one sentence. And I also save time, but I don't have to do any niceties. I don't have to ask the AI, please do this for me. And I don't have to thank it when we are through. Now you can do that and it respond back and make it seem more like a cordial experience. or you could choose to drop the niceties, and that'll save a little time. So then you will hit enter or you will click send prompt. You could also dictate your responses by clicking the microphone. Another option, if you did want to give a photo for a reference to what you were going to ask of the AI, that's where you could add photos. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter, and let's see what the output it generates is like. It says an LLM is like a super smart autocomplete robot that has read tons of books and websites so it could guess the next words to answer your questions and have conversations with you. Pretty good. We see that because of asking it to bring down the complexity as if we were a 10-year-old, but saying it's like a super smart and we could relate it to a robot and read tons of books. Okay. So just this large, vast amount of information to be able to have a conversation with us. No, we could still ask anything. We could follow up in this conversation if we want to tweak it to how would I explain LLMs to a senior citizen. A large language model is a computer program trained on enormous amounts of writing so it can understand questions and respond in natural language, almost like talking with a very well-read assistant. So you have this assistant there to answer your questions and respond back to you in natural language. The next thing would be you'll type in the prompt, give me 3 examples of narrow AI in daily life. Press enter and read the response. Discuss how the AI created new examples in a new format. Okay, so let's enter that in now. Give me 3 examples of narrow AI in daily life. So 3 common examples of narrow AI. Notice AI designed for one specific task. You have email spam filters, voice assistants like Siri or Google Assistant, and recommendation systems such as the ones on Netflix or Amazon. So how did it create these things? And remember, it was generating one word after the next very quickly. What's the probability of, since we asked about narrow AI, then that's already letting it hone in on its data of the types of things that we would encounter. Okay, and then if it's going to speak about a voice assistant, then it's going to have a high probability to bring up an actual assistant and to name ones like Alexa and Siri. So the output we see is actually brand new content that it generated rather than it being copied and pasted from somewhere on the internet. Yes, we could have Googled and found references, found an article, and there'd be a definition of an LLM or on narrow AI, okay, and articles on what it is and isn't. But because this is actually creating something new, we could be more creative with it, okay? So explain LLMs to me as if I am in, we'll try to throw it off being creative, an episode of the original Star Trek series. Captain, so it knew to throw in the word, the high probability of the first word would be to, we put in who's the person here, so we're in the role of the captain. Captain, and LLM is rather like the ship's computer. It has absorbed vast quantities of Federation knowledge, and it can respond to questions in ordinary language. But unlike Mr. Spock, it does not truly understand the universe. It predicts the most likely response based on patterns and the information it has seen. This hasn't existed before until this moment, and that's why it is very powerful and it's also very interesting and cool. So now for your lab, you will probably want to use ChatGPT since that was used in the example. If you're familiar with Chat and you have used it and are comfortable with it, maybe expand to Google Gemini and try it out this time. If you've tried it out, Claude could be a third option. You could keep it on the free tier with creating an account. You could use your Google account if you have one for your account purposes. And maybe you ask a prompt like, what is narrow AI? And explain it to me like blank. Be creative when what you're filling in there. Then you'll write a second prompt asking AI to give you 5 real world examples of the same type of AI. You're saving its responses for your documentation and what your prompts were. And then your short reflection, how did the AI's explanation help you understand this concept? Okay. Some example that it gave you maybe gave you a more clear picture. Note that. This should allow you to fill out your portfolio artifact. Some common problems that might be in your work. If you're having issues, you could check the problems and the given solutions. Be sure, yet again, to read the best practices for each of the slides. Now for your reflection journal. Describe an example of narrow AI that you use in your daily life, and how does it make your life easier? What is the one specific task it does well? Okay, maybe you are thinking about talking with Siri and asking it to, you know, who a certain artist is on the song, or just set a reminder in your phone. Imagine you could ask a Gen AI to create something for you right now, such as an essay, an image, code, or a song. What would you ask it to make, and why would that be useful? So maybe it is something for fun or creative purposes. Maybe it's something you want to use for work. What's one thing you learned today about how large language models work that surprised you? Do you think Gen AI will help you in school or your future job? How? What concerns do you have about it? And we will be looking at examples of jobs using generative AI and how you could use it. Right now, you are speculating how could you use this in a future job? Now think about a job or career that you're interested in. Now, how might Gen AI tools change that job in the next couple years, 5 years, 10 years? The assessment rubric for the submitted work. And that concludes Module 1, Lesson 3 for NeXT Intellect. Thank you.